on this new jobs report in studio and what it could mean for the Fed. Judy Shelton, senior fellow at the Independent Institute. Her new book, Good as Gold, is coming out in October. And you're not, just from the book, you're not saying we return to the gold standard. You're just saying we return to an idea where we want just a solid currency that isn't the vicissitudes of the Fed every other week. Shouldn't be something that controls whether our the fluctuations in global currencies.
That's so well stated. I wish I had put that on the jacket cover.
I would have written one of those things for the back, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
People have said, Joe, who?
No, we need dependable money.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was one of the points. We can say they waited too long, they took too long, it took too long at zero. Why are we talking so much about the Fed anyway? Why is our entire economic future based on what these people think and how they control overnight repos? It ought to be the private sector, unencumbered, to do exactly what it does well. The Fed is there to try to help in any way it can with the private sector. Isn't that what it's, and not help the government?
Absolutely. I think the Fed is too powerful, too prominent in financial markets. I think it's inherently political because it can channel financial rewards to one segment of society at the expense of others. And we shouldn't be obsessed with the Fed. We talk about soft landing. The Fed shouldn't be the pilot. They really should be the ground crew, make sure the runway is solid and safe.
How would that work? Is there somebody else in charge, or is it just a rules-based body that you can't do things unless X, Y, and Z line up?
A rules-based approach would be a big improvement. And the irony for me is that most of the people who are most concerned about politicizing the Fed and they want to preserve the independence are the most critical of having any kind of rules-based approach. They want to leave it all to the discretion of 12 voting members who meet 8 times a year to decide what is the cost of capital, which is arguably the most important price in an economy devoted to free markets and capitalist endeavor. And yet I would think, even from the Soviet experiment, that we should have learned central planning doesn't work. But when it comes to determining that price, we fix it. And we have it accomplished through a government agency that seeks to manage the interest rate instead of letting market forces determine it through supply and demand.
And you can err on both sides. And Rick is, I think, still of the opinion that the die was already cast 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, where all assets, no one knew how to price anything because we were at zero, so no one knew the cost of money. So we were already going to be in this position, this conundrum we're in right now. 3 or 4 years ago, we were, sort of setting the table for this mess that we may be in right now because we may have stayed too long. I don't know what, do you think we've stayed too long?
Think,
is it too restrictive?
By saying it's restrictive, we're already suggesting that there really is a different real rate that the market would set, and that the Fed is deliberately keeping rates artificially high. So just let the market do it and
stop with this.
Well, one thing we know is when you distort the market so much by having a zero interest rate, you cause all kinds of malinvestment. You don't allow price signals to operate effectively, so you don't know how to have capital flow to its optimal use. And it's clear we needed to come up from that, and that does feed inflation. But I think I would have quit at 4.25%, 4.5%. That's where we were back in December of 2022, and then let the market sort it out. The Fed should be relying more on open market operations. And that would kill 2 birds with 1 stone because they should be reducing their footprint in financial markets. They should be selling off part of the portfolio.
Making it advantageous for banks to act certain ways at the expense of entrepreneurs and innovators.
Well, what they do now, the Fed's main tool, unlike when Paul Volcker was the chairman, the Fed's main tool is a very perverse incentive. They are paying this high rate, 5.4%, to commercial banks to keep the money sitting there stagnant. This is like paying farmers not to grow crops or paying people not to work. It doesn't make sense.
We've done those things before, too.
Yeah, and I think it violates, it not only discourages entrepreneurial endeavor, but I just think that it's sort of you do interest rates by diktat instead of letting the organic forces in the economy, the people who are really there, they should decide the cost of capital, because we're seeing that Federal Reserve officials are not omniscient, and I think that panics the market a little bit.
The one thing I would say is it has benefited us greatly over the last 20 years in times of crisis to be able to have a Fed that could react quickly. I just think back to the financial crisis. What would have happened potentially just in terms of the unemployment rate, of the pain that would have come? Not arguing you could push it off for forever and make it never come true, but is there something to be said for having a Federal Reserve that can act quickly in
yes,
time of a deep crisis?
I would agree with you that the lender of last resort function is important. And when we had COVID and shut down the economy, the Fed had to deploy the airbags. But at some point, you have to get them out of the way so you can see through the windshield and the car gets back on the road. And I think, like any institution, when you get power, it's hard to give it up. So the Fed was even commenting on fiscal policy and what the government should be doing. And then the Fed was sure that the resulting inflation would be transitory. Now we're talking about both fiscal stimulus and monetary stimulus.
Elizabeth Warren was mad that the Fed wasn't going to do enough to stop the flooding and the heat waves and the strong hurricanes.
Let's expand their area of authority.
Let's move on to that, so that we can, cool the planet and lower the seas. That Jay Powell can
sure,
try
because
that
they don't have enough to do.
Yeah, because they don't have enough to do. Real quickly, will there be a 50 basis point cut in this cycle? Are we going to need that?
That would not only alarm markets further, but I think the political implications would be damaging to the credibility of the Fed.